Now, here's the question that nearly every dental school will ask you. It's a group session and you're not just being watched one-on-one, you are still being watched. This came directly from a dean of admissions at an open house of a dental school. And you want to make sure that you're avoiding board gestures. And what are board gestures? The second thing that you want to do is make sure, even if it's a long info session, and I cannot stress this one enough. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video. So today, she's got her blazer, she's formal, she's ready. I want to talk to you guys about interview tips. So I'm going to go through some things that you should prepare for, some questions that you should be aware of, what you should know how to answer, as well as how to prepare for both virtual and in-person interviews. Now, for those of you that have been around for a little bit, you know that last cycle we did a virtual-only interviews, and I know that this cycle they're doing sort of a mix, offering both virtual and in-person. So I'll give you guys tips for both of that. And if you're new here, hi, my name is Medina. I make videos for pre-dental students, and I would love it if you could subscribe down below and like this video. So let's get into it. So let's start out with some questions that you should know how to answer, as well as some information that you should know going into any interview, whether that's dental school, medical school, any sort of pre-professional school. These are questions that you should be prepared to answer and things that you should be looking at. First thing you should do is make sure to look into the program whose interview you're attending. And what does that mean? You should be well versed in their academic program. You should read their mission statement. You should know whether or not the school has a pass-fail curriculum. Do they integrate with a medical student? Do they have research facilities? All those things are very important to know and to mention as sort of talking points, and it'll make you really stand out if you really do your research and make sure that you are well aware of all of the offerings that a school has. A lot of schools are very proud of the things that they offer their students, and so you want to make sure that you kind of hit that when you're talking to your interviewer, because it'll show that you're really interested. So the first question that we all dread hearing, but every school will likely ask you, is tell me about yourself. Now, this should be a brief overview of who you are and where you come from, and it should highlight things that make you unique, what makes you different. This is not the time to go into your strongest attributes as an applicant, because those questions will definitely come later. But this is just where they really want to get to know you as a person, not as a student. Okay, so the next question that you should be able to answer is, why our program? Why did you choose to apply to our program, or would you go to our program should you be accepted? Now, this question is where you pick 2 to 3 things that you've read about, that you've looked into in the school, and you highlight those things as attributes that attract you there. Obviously, you can highlight many different things. Every school is different. Every school has both positive and negative attributes. But you should really make sure to highlight things that if a school has a lot of different programs, they have outreach and they're very proud of them, they're constantly highlighting them, their news articles are talking about them, those are things that you probably want to mention, because they want to know that you're interested in their initiatives that they're very proud of and are likely putting in a lot of funding to. So for my personal interviews, I talked about things like the student to faculty ratio. I said that it was very important to me that I get individualized attention despite being in a larger class. I also talked about the fact that one of the schools that I interviewed at had completely brand new updated clinic facilities, and that I thought that that was really important because dentistry is always evolving, and so being able to use the latest technology is really helpful to train future dentists and be prepared to use those technologies, as opposed to kind of be hanging back in the past and using older instruments and technology. And then the other thing that I talked about is a diverse patient pool. Both of the schools that I interviewed at were in New York, and the fact that we have a very, very diverse patient pool is really good, because not only do you come across people from all backgrounds, all ethnicities, all ages, it's also important because, one, you're able to establish a rapport, learn how to relate to people from different cultures, backgrounds, and also you're likely to see a variety of different cases, because there are certain health issues that are prevalent in certain groups as opposed to others. And so I mentioned that as an educational opportunity, and saying that having a diverse patient pool will better train me for the workforce, because I intend to work in the city and I will have patients that are very diverse, and so having that background from dental school was important to me. Okay, now for some surprise questions. So some of the surprise questions that I heard that I really should have been a little bit more prepared for was, one, what is your biggest weakness? And obviously this is something where you do want to highlight something that you are weak at, but you want to be able to show that you are able to overcome that, or that doesn't detract from your abilities as a student, it doesn't detract from your productivity. And the other question that I was surprised to hear at one of my interviews was, what was something that you didn't like about undergrad? And I was kind of, in my mind, mind debating with myself whether or not to be honest about it, because there were a few things that I wasn't happy with during my undergrad experience, but I didn't want to really delve into it and rag on the school, and so I just talked about the fact that it was an insanely large school and our classes were 500 to 700 people for some science classes, and so you really felt like you were just kind of on your own when it came to the learning. But, you know, be prepared to hear those kind of questions, be prepared to answer those kind of questions, because they might come at you. And you want to make sure that that's not the first time that you're hearing it, so that you kind of have an idea of what you're going to say. It doesn't have to be super rehearsed. Now, here's the question that nearly every dental school will ask you, and that is, what makes you a good fit for our school? And so you want to make sure that this is where you go into your academic background. You talk about things that make you a good student, that will make you a good dentist, and there are things that you are extremely proud of about yourself. So I would say if you're looking at your, let's say, resume or your experiences section, pick 2 or 3 things that you're incredibly proud of about yourself and that you think make you a strong applicant. And those could be anything from extensive face-to-face communication in a certain setting, or research experience, or extensive dental experience in a dental office if you worked as an assistant or you were a hygienist in the past, or you're an internationally trained dentist. Those are all things that you really want to mention here when you get this question. The other thing that you want to do with this question is you want to have read the school's mission statement. You want to make sure that the values that you bring up and that you say are important to you align with the school's mission statement. So if the school is very big on community outreach, you want to make sure to highlight things in your background that are community outreach. If the school is big on research, you want to be careful with this one, because you don't want to show a huge interest in research and then not end up doing it if you do get accepted. But if you have done research in college and the school is big on research and they're always making groundbreaking studies, you want to make sure to highlight that. So you want to make sure that whatever the school is proud of, you want to highlight those things and how you would fit into them. Okay, so now let's talk about group interviews and info sessions. Most schools will not just do an individual interview with member faculty or admissions. Most schools will have you do a group session either with a few members of admissions or current students. Now, these sessions, obviously last year were virtual, this year would be in person or virtual, but the tips ring true for both. So the first thing you want to do in a group session or an info session is make sure to ask at least one relevant and thoughtful question. Make sure that you make your name known, you introduce yourself, and then ask the question, and make sure that this is something that is relevant to the topic of discussion, because most of the time some people will be shy and they may not be able to ask this question, but they're probably thinking the same thing. So make sure that it's a question that you actually want to ask, but it's something that is relevant to what's being discussed. The second thing that you want to do is make sure, even if it's a long info session, and I cannot stress this one enough, whether or not you are on Zoom, and remember, if you're on Zoom, your camera has to be on the entire time, or you're in person, make sure that you remain engaged and attentive the entire time. And what does that mean? It means that you're not clicking through things on your screen if it's virtual, because you can see that if the light changes all over your screen, that means that your windows are popping up and you're doing other things. And you want to make sure that you're avoiding board gestures. And what are board gestures? This would be a board gesture. Nodding off would be a board gesture. You wouldn't believe how many times I saw in group sessions people literally look like they were ready to doze off, and people doing this and a lot of this and just kind of sitting there like this and just waiting for it to end. You want to make sure that even though it's a group session and you're not just being watched one-on-one, you are still being watched. And so that's something that I want to stress to you guys, is that you want to avoid those kind of gestures even in a group session, and especially if this is in person. Okay, now let's talk about my favorite part, which is attire. So in terms of attire, obviously this is pretty intuitive for most people, but for those of you who are kind of questioning it, it is business formal attire. So what does that mean? You should be dressed modestly, no loud colors, but if you want to play around with shades that are neutrals like navies and grays and different kind of variations of that, that's totally fine. So for women, what does that mean? Usually a blazer on top, and underneath a blouse or a button down, and then on the bottom you could wear either something like a pencil skirt or slacks. It's totally up to you. You don't have to wear one or the other, but I would say a good rule of thumb is if you're wearing a skirt, you should have it be, at the knee, not shorter. And then one very important thing that I want to tell all the ladies that are interviewing out there this cycle and future cycles is no heels. This came directly from a dean of admissions at an open house of a dental school. And the words that came out of her mouth were specifically, you're not going to the club, you don't need to wear heels. If you want to wear like a little 1/2-inch kitten heel, sure, fine, knock yourself out. Don't wear 5-inch stilettos. One, it draws kind of an unwelcomed attention if you're clicking down the halls of the school when you're walking into your interview. And two, most schools will offer a tour, so if you're there for 3-4 hours walking around the entire school, doing that in heels is not going to be comfortable. If you want to maybe wear wedges, that's a different story, but you want to make sure also that everything is pulled back, very formal. And now for men, the traditional attire is obviously a suit with a suit jacket and slacks on the bottom, and then a button down underneath. Now, in terms of the colors of the button down, can't go wrong with a crisp white shirt, but again, you can play around with the colors, neutrals only, you know, blacks, blues, grays, all that. I would say, personally, I think that a tie is optional. You don't have to wear a tie if you want to. Get creative with it. Maybe don't wear like a solid color, maybe wear a print. That could be interesting. Obviously, for the shoes for men, it's dress shoes or loafers are fine. One thing that I will tell you guys that I've heard from my guy friends that have had interviews at both companies and pre-professional institutions is, for guys, if you wear a pair of like funky or interesting socks, it's actually a really interesting icebreaker and conversation starter. So if you own any, that would be a good time to wear those, and if someone notices them, that's a good way to talk to a prospective future classmate or even a member of admissions or a member of the school faculty. Okay, now here I'm going to give you guys some bonus tips for virtual interviews if you guys are still doing those. I know that this year is optional, so everyone's kind of doing a half and half. One, find a place in your house that has good lighting, is quiet, and has a blank background. So the background that I have right now behind me is probably not a good background. You want to be usually in front of a wall or something that is very neutral, and obviously something that people are not going to be walking through as you're having your interview. Other thing is, for virtual interviews, you kind of have a little bit of a leg up, and let me tell you why. Is because all the things that I mentioned earlier, all the things that you should be looking up, like the school's mission statement, the school's good attributes, or even things that you are particularly proud of in your background, in your experience on your resume, but things that you are afraid that you might have trouble remembering in the moment, make little notes on post-its and just stick them all around your screen. Make sure that they're close enough to the camera so that you can look at them without looking too far in any direction, so that you're not looking like you're actually looking somewhere. But it's just a good thing to have. It helps a lot of people who are very anxious and tend to forget things when they're nervous, and it's just a little hack for you if you need it. The other thing is, this is totally optional, but what I used is this little ring light from Amazon. It clips on to the top of your screen on your computer, and it goes literally around your camera. It turns on like this, and you can adjust the brightness, and it's rechargeable. It's only a couple bucks on Amazon. I would say that it was really helpful for me because my living room, when I was doing my interviews, was pretty dull in terms of lighting, and so that's why this was really helpful and came in handy. But totally up to you. It's optional. I can link some down below if you guys want to take a look at these. Okay, so those are my interview tips for you guys, and I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, for everyone who has interviewed, has gotten interviews already this cycle, and is going to be interviewing in the future, congratulations. You are one step closer to becoming a dentist, and you're almost there. So I hope this video was helpful. Please feel free to leave any other questions in the comments if you guys have any. Remember that I interviewed at Columbia and NYU, so if you have any specific questions that you want to ask me, please feel free to drop them in the comments. I'm happy to answer anything that I can, as long as obviously I can remember it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for the next video. I will see you guys next time. Bye.